All right, well, I'll start with the even answers from, so this is the even answer from P4, that's 26. This is where it asks for the x and y intercepts. If you plug in 0 for y, and then you solve it, you get 1/2. You plug in 0 for x, and you get the square root of -1, which doesn't work, so it's no solution. So x-intercept is 1/2 0, and y-intercept is none. All right, the other even was 72, endpoints of the diameter. You want the standard form of the equation of the circle, so the first thing you have to do is find the center. So I'm going to do -4 plus 4 divided by 2 and -1 plus 1 divided by 2. I get 0 over 2 and 0 over 2. So the center is 0, 0. Which means it's going to be an x squared plus y squared. If I had, obviously, if I had actual values for the center, then it would be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. So then when you go to find the diameter, you've got three options. One is when you go to find the radius, is find the length of the diameter, cut it in half, or you can find the distance from the center to the diameter, or you can take your center and plug it in, and a point and plug it in and find your radius. So who did what? How many of you found the actual diameter and divided by 2? How about center to diameter? Okay, and how about actually plugging in the x and the y and the h? Okay, so it's center to diameter. So if I do center to endpoint, let's just say I pick the 4, 1 because there's no negatives. Sometimes we're better at that. Then I would get the square root of 4 minus 0 squared plus 1 minus 0 squared. Square root of 4 squared plus 1 squared, 16 plus 1, and that's the square root of 17. So that's your radius. When you plug it back into your equation, it's squared. So this would be x squared plus y squared equals 17. Good. Any other questions from the homework? Okay. P5 is the last of the review chapter that we're going to do, or prereq chapter for calc that we're going to do. This is all about lines, slopes of lines, equations of lines, that kind of stuff. Again, goes way back, but this is one of those skills that you need to definitely know and be able to reference quickly. So this is not something that you should have to keep reviewing. So the slope and the y-intercept from an equation, if it's in slope and y-intercept form, this is the first form you need to know. Y equals mx plus b, then the m is your slope, and the b is the y coordinate of your y-intercept. So if I had something like 15, then my slope, which is m, is 5, and my y-intercept would be 0, 3. If it's not in slope-intercept form, then the other form that it could be, so this is slope-intercept, then the other form it can be is standard, which is ax plus by equals c, where all of them are whole numbers, and x has to be positive. So if you look at like something like 21, this is 7x plus 6y equals 30. This is standard form. And so you can just simply solve it for y to get it in a slope-intercept form and then figure out the slope and the y-intercept from there. You can also use the shortcut that the slope is -a over b and plug in 0 for x to get the y-intercept. So one way to solve it, I would get 6y equals -7x plus 30, and then divide both sides by 6, and I get -7/6x plus 5, and that gives me that the slope is -7/6, and the b is 5, so the y-intercept is 0, 5. Or, like I said, you can use -a over b, -7 over 6, that's your slope. And then if I plug 0 in for x, I get 6y equals 30, and y would equal 30 divided by 6, which is 5. So either way, you get the same answer. Either solve it for y or use the -a over b and then the 0 in for x for your shortcut. And then obviously it says sketch the line. So if I wanted to sketch this, that's when it's probably easiest to put it in slope-intercept because you're the most familiar with it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Plot a point, plot your y-intercept, and then use your slope. So if my slope is -7/6, I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, down 7, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the right, 6. Or I can go up 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Either way, you get your line. So it doesn't matter if you keep the negative with the top or the bottom, or as long as you don't keep it with both. Questions on those? Okay, another thing to remember is the special cases. So if it's a horizontal line, what's the slope? Good. And it's the y is constantly the same, right? The x changes, but the y is constantly the same. So this is a y equals a number scenario. And then if it's vertical, then the slope is what? Undefined, right? Or there's no slope. Those mean the same things. And it's x equals a number. For the next section, it gives you the 2 points. You're finding slope. So slope equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Obviously, you just plug them in and simplify it. If 0 is in the numerator, then that means it's 0. If 0 is in the denominator, it means it's undefined, okay? Easy stuff, right? Good? Okay. All right, then we get into use the point and a line to find the equation. So to find 3 additional points through which the line passes. So if I were to, let me look at 42. If I were to plot 3, 1, 2, 3, negative 2, and my slope is 0, that means that this is a horizontal line. So I can pick any point along that horizontal line, which means my y should always be negative 2, but the x is going to change. If, let's say, the slope was negative 1, and I had 10, 6, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 10, negative 6 would be here. Slope being negative 1 means negative 1 over 1. So you can go down 1 and right 1, or you can go up 1 and left 1. Either way, you want to find the points along the line by doing that. Then the next section says to find the equation of the line with this information. So you have a couple of options here. One is using point slope. That's the last of the different types of formulas that you need. So we've got slope-intercept, we've got standard, and you've got point slope. Point slope is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And so for these, you can take, so let's say it's number 51. I can take this as x1 and this as y1, and that is your slope, and you can plug it in. So the y stays as y, minus a negative 2 becomes plus 2, equals m, which is 3 times x minus x1, which is 0. And I get y plus 2 equals 3x, and then I'd get y equals 3x minus 2. That's one option. Or, and it says slope-intercept form, so you want to make sure that it's in that y equals mx plus b format. Or you can plug it into y equals mx plus b, plug it in as x and y, so this would be negative 2 equals, the m was 3, the x was 0, and the b is what we're trying to find. Negative 2 equals 3 plus b. Subtract the 3. Oh, sorry, that's 0. 3 times 0 is 0 plus b. And so b is negative 2. And then you would take and plug back in the m and the b. So the m was 3, the b is now negative 2, and so I'd get y equals 3x minus 2. So either way, you get the same answer. Either use point slope, plug it in and just simplify it, or use slope intercept to find your b, and then take the m and the b and plug it back in. How you do it is completely up to you. You just want to make sure that it's back in slope intercept form. Notice that the directions say to sketch the line. So for this, I'm looking for the work for the equation and also the graph of the line. Make sure you read your directions carefully. Questions on that one? So it's been a little while since we've done these, but you've done them like several years in a row, so hopefully they're relatively fresh. The next group says find the slope-intercept form of the equation of the line passing through the points and then sketch the line. So the difference between what we just did and now is this time we're given 2 points instead of giving the point in the slope. So what's the first thing you're going to find for 65? The slope. So first I'm going to find the slope by doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if I did that for 66, -4 minus 3 over -4 minus 4 gives me -7 over -8, or 7/8. There's my point. There's my slope. And then I'm going to use that with either of the points that are here. I'm going to this time choose 4, 3, but you could pick either one. And I choose to plug it in a point slope. Again, that's just my preferred method, but you could use either one. So y minus y1, which is 3, equals m, which we just found is 7/8 times x minus x1, which is 4. And then I'm going to distribute the 7/8. This goes in here twice, so this is 7/2. And then I'm going to add the 3. And yes, you're going to get fractions. This would be 6 over 2, so -1/6. So with these, you want to first find your slope and then plug in the slope with either point to get the equation, and then again, sketch the graph. So make sure everywhere it says to sketch the graph that you're including that. Questions on those? Okay, then we get into the parallel and the perpendicular lines. So what's true about two lines that are parallel? What's true about their slopes? Good. And what about perpendicular lines? Opposite reciprocal, right? So opposite sign and reciprocal. So if I had the slope of a line was 2/3, then the slope of a line that's parallel to it is also 2/3. The slope of a line that is perpendicular to it is a -3/2. So for 87 and 89, it says to write the slope forms of the equation of the line through the given point. That is A, parallel to the given line, and B, perpendicular to the given line. So I'm going to focus on 88. So the line that you're given, the only piece of information you need from that is its slope. You can either solve it for y, or you can use the shortcut that is -a over b. So obviously it's a shortcut for a reason. I would advise using that one. If I look at this equation and I do -a over b, a is here and b is here, that's -1 over 1. And so I know the slope of this line is -1, which means the slope of a line that's parallel to that is what? What's true about the slope of parallel lines? They're the same. So the slope of a line parallel to that initial one would be -1. And then the slope of a line perpendicular to it is the opposite reciprocal. So if I change the sign, it's positive. If I flip -1 over 1, I still get 1 over 1, right? So the slope of a line that's perpendicular would just be +1. And then the second piece of information it gives you is the point that they pass through, which is -3, 2, and that you're going to use for both. So I'm going to use point slope for the first one. Y minus 2 would equal -1 times x minus a -3 becomes +3. Y minus 2 equals -x minus 3. Y would equal -x, add the 2 here, minus 1. So that's the slope, that's the equation of a line that's parallel to my initial one. And then the perpendicular one would be y minus 2 equals 1 times x plus 3. And I get y minus 2 equals x plus 3. Add the 2. And y equals x plus 5. So for 87 and 89, you're going to use the initial equation to get just its slope. And then you're going to plug in the same slope with that point to get the parallel line. and then the opposite reciprocal slope with that point to get the perpendicular line. As silly as it sounds, if I give you this question on the final, it's one of the most commonly missed questions because of silly mistakes, so just be really careful. Same thing with graphing. Like I'll put a graphing of a line question on a midterm or a final and people will miss it because you focus so much on like the sine curves and the roses and all that stuff that you forget the basics of the lines. So you want to make sure you're really careful. Questions on anything P5 related? Okay.